Remember Resident Evil 4's original GameCube case? The one that said only 4 in the corner? It's hard to imagine now, considering the game has been ported every which way to the Nokia phone and back. But despite its acclaimed status, all its ports, and the modest visual facelift it has received over the years, one thing remains woefully unchanged and firmly cements Resident Evil 4 in 2005 when it was originally released: those damned tank controls. Even the Wii edition, the best port of the game, I must say, was shackled by its rigid movement. That is, until Resident Evil 4 VR, which presents the game in its best light since its original release. Playing through the action horror classic on the Oculus Quest 2 has given me a feeling I've wanted since first finishing Resident Evil 4 16 years ago on the GameCube. The sense of experiencing it for the first time all over again. And that feeling is downright awesome. From the ground up, the game has been meticulously recreated in Unreal Engine 4 in uncanny detail to fully function in VR. And the result is so impressive, it's nothing short of magic. From upscale textures to sound effects and animations, Resident Evil 4 can now be seen, quite literally, through an entirely new lens. Stepping into the shoes of protagonist and pretty boy Leon S. Kennedy on a mission to save the president's daughter has never felt cooler. Nor has the horror representation of Eastern Europe ever felt more frightening. Nearly everything has been updated to accommodate VR. Your equipment is now accessible on your physical body. Shoulder for your knife, chest for a grenade, and utility belt for weapon magazines. This means physically loading your gun and cocking it before firing it off, unsheathing your knife to break open crates, or pulling the pin on a grenade and letting it cook before tossing it at the feet of some ganados. And performing nearly every action made me feel like a total president-daughter saving badass. VR has unanimously excelled at first-person combat, and it shines exceptionally well in Resident Evil 4 VR. Shooting dynamite out of someone's hands, juking out of the way of a thrown hatchet, unloading a submachine gun with one hand, and pulling out a pistol with the other to show off enemies next to me felt so satisfying. Even just opening cabinets was an oddly thrilling new way to interact with a world I know so well. Pumping a shotgun and squeezing the trigger point blank in an enemy's face, followed with a blood-drenched explosion of their skull, only for tentacles to erupt from its neck up close and personal in VR is gasp-inducing. And even when I was shaken with anxiety, there's no denying I had a smile from ear to ear. While combat is far more versatile in ways the original never could be, like dual-wielding a knife and a pistol, or even a shotgun and a submachine gun, don't be fooled. The odds still stacked against me, and each onslaught of Ganados felt harrowing. Resident Evil 4 VR still manages to capture the tension and stress of the original very well. And honestly, dual-wielding and guns blazing is rarely a route worth taking, as it can be a waste of resources, but there's no denying it got me out of some dire situations. As mentioned, actions that were once a simple button press now require physicality from the player, like opening cabinets, drawers, toggling switches, turning door keys, and solving puzzles. It's a little touch, and not an entirely remarkable idea for a VR title, but it remains effective in elevating the Resident Evil 4 experience. Being able to open drawers or slowly ease a door to see what's around the corner has a huge impact on immersion and helps the game feel like a new and modern experience. Even saving on a typewriter now involves physically pressing the mechanical keys of an early 20th century typewriter, and it is such a simple delight. Some things are locked to button presses, and rightfully so, like jumping out of a window or hopping over a barrier. And in these cases, it switches to third person. For me, someone who experiences minor motion sickness, I was grateful for this. But your mileage may vary. You can also opt to remain in first person thanks to an option found in the settings. Seeing Resident Evil 4's iconic enemies and environments up close emphasizes the feeling of experiencing it for the first time again. I was able to notice detail before, like in a Ganado's face, its eyes vacant and googly with their mouth slightly ajar and crooked. It made an already unsettling enemy feel far more eerie and intrusive. Environments I had seen a dozen times before in my previous console playthroughs felt all the more engrossing. It took more time to observe the haunting Victorian paintings in the castle, or that cart filled with corpses by the farm. Just looking at the dirty water in the well as I reached into it to pick up treasure made me want to wash my hands in real life. As for accessibility, the options are plentiful. It ranges from full motion to standing, sitting down, and whether you're right or left-handed. There's also different modes of interaction, such as immersive, which puts all the gear and weapons on your physical body, or comfort mode, where your arsenal can be switched and rotated through with a few button presses. Additionally, there's a wealth of options to tweak and finesse your ideal playing experience. I played in immersive mode standing with teleportation movement for the entirety of my 13-hour playthrough, and rarely did I experience any discomfort. But not everything works as well as it's intended. Counter moves in particular is a mechanic I abandoned using early in my playthrough. Counter moves like kicks and suplexes can be performed after stunning an enemy by shooting them in the knees or in the face. In these occurrences, I found myself clumsily fumbling to get close enough to an enemy to press the button and initiate it, often completely missing the window of chance and thrusting myself into harm's way unintentionally. The action felt clumsy and unintuitive compared to the physical motion of everything else, so I eventually just stopped using it. Some boss fights also don't translate smoothly into VR. Del Lago, the swamp boss fight in particular, proved to be a point of frustration for me. Controlling the boat while being pulled along by the giant beast and having to simultaneously load a harpoon gun and fire it was a lot to manage. It's something that worked well on console, but having the full motion of VR while operating multiple things at once was a little too disorienting. To my surprise, however, parts I dreaded returning to from the original, specifically the game's final action-focused act, were actually improved thanks to VR. Traditionally, considering RE4's original rigid movements and lack of cover system, fighting off the game's final military armed foes was usually a slow slog to run around a corner only to get a shot in before scurrying away. Pacing in the original game became disjointed and kind of out of character in these moments. But in VR, the action is amplified thanks to being able to physically duck around corners, take cover, shoot through openings in the wall, or toss grenades out. It felt amazing and made getting in a shootout with crossbow wielding, Gatling gun shooting, axe throwing goons a total blast. This exhilarating implementation of combat makes the lack of Mercenaries mode, however, all the more apparent. Playing RE4's action segments through VR lenses left me wanting to see how its action horror can translate in the arcade-style experience of Mercenaries, so its absence is a minor letdown. So instead, the moment the credits rolled, I began my second playthrough on New Game Plus, with plans to run through an additional, harder professional difficulty mode. There's no game I've completed more times in my life than Resident Evil 4, nor is there a game I've purchased as many times. But experiencing it via a different format is an astonishing experience. Bringing the 16-year-old classic to VR doesn't just reaffirm why it's a classic to begin with, but is now among the best VR games on offer. And it's evident that building the game from the ground up was a true labor of love. Resident Evil 4 VR is an essential game to have in your Oculus Quest 2 library, right alongside Beat Saber and Superhot. It is a welcoming version to newcomers that are VR capable. And, most excitingly, not only will players get to experience Resident Evil 4 in a new way that doesn't compromise the original's greatness, even with its quirks, but a new generation of players will get to hear Leon S. Kennedy's campy one-liners. And that's a prospect I'm very excited about.